Good evening and welcome. Mid-February edition of Supporting Families. I'm Chris Bear, host, and excited for tonight's conversation. We're going to be talking about parental accountability. If you are joining us tonight, at whatever point you see this broadcast, let us know where you're from. Hello, Athens, Georgia. We always like to know where the people are coming in from. I am in Brooklyn, New York. And it's nice to know that in maybe a month or so when we do this, there'll actually be light out because it'll be closer to spring. I'm excited for that. But before we get started, let me just read just a reminder of a couple announcements. This live stream is educational and not intended to replace therapy. So for treatment-related questions, please work with your provider, or you can contact the local clinician. The IOCDF actually has a good resource that you can use. I just put it on the screen so you can locate a provider as well as support groups that they have at iocdf.org/find-help. And the International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline. And so if you are in crisis or you're feeling suicidal or unsafe, please use the 988 suicide and crisis hotline. You can do it by dialing 988 from your phone here in the US, or you can also go to the site, which is www.988lifeline.org. If you're watching this from another country, you can always dial whatever is the most convenient way to get emergency help. And also here in the United States, if you need help immediately, you can go to an emergency room or dial 911. And we want to create a safe space and be kind and respectful to everyone. Remember, this is a live stream, and we are all here as a big community to help each other, and we welcome your questions and can't wait to get into it. Last reminder that this is being recorded. You are watching it on social media, so it does live for a long time. So just be conscious of what your comments are. But cool, we're really excited to. I'm multiple people tonight. Just me. I'm excited to be here tonight too. Folks who I excited to talk to: Susan Boaz, who I know for a long time, and Dr. Fiona. Is it McPhee or McAfee?
McAfee.
Cool. Excited for you both tonight to share. Let's do a little bit of intros. Fiona, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I'm a child and teen psychologist. I work with parents a lot too. I specialize in OCD, ADHD, and anxiety, and I work in a private practice here in Philadelphia.
Oh, I forgot that you are on the East Coast. Very cool. And Sue, we're all East Coasting tonight. And Susan Boaz, who, if you joined OCD Camp last month, you might know her from as my co-host. We co-host OCD Camp, and Susan, well, president of the IOCD, a former president, board member. Yeah, I won't do the intro for you, but I'd love to. But a well-recognized face in the OCD community and PANDAS community.
Thanks, Chris. Hey, I'm Susan Boaz. I am most importantly the mom of a young woman who's now 24 named Meg, who has been through the full spectrum of OCD since she was the age of 3. She's in full recovery now and is getting her PhD in clinical psych. So super proud of her, but it's been a whole journey. So I love talking with parents because, it's such a journey for us. It's a specific journey for our kids, but it's a real separate and important journey that parents go through on a lot of levels. And so talking about that and being really authentic about it, I think is so important. And I'm really grateful to be here today. I'm also on the board of directors of the IOCDF because I think that research and advocacy is the most important thing that we can do, and training. And it's honestly a blast to be a part of that organization. So thanks for having me.
Right. And we were just chatting offline before about the IOCDF conference, which is coming up soon. Yeah. July in Seattle. So we will talk a little bit more about that at the end. But
I thought you were
hey, Margaret.
Just ask me if I could talk about all the things I did wrong as a parent. And that would take up the whole hour.
Well, it's not just you. It's me too. There were a lot of mistakes that I think I talk about, like.
I do want to
Good.
say, I'm sure if we talked about all the things you did right as a parent, it would take up the whole hour too.
Oh, days, Fiona.
Yeah, I guess, but that does lead me to the first question. We were joking about that, but sometimes there are things that it's a new journey for a parent when someone they love is diagnosed with OCD, and new skills to learn, and things that you do wrong. My kind of go-to out right now with my kids is like, I've never parented a, insert kid's age here. I never parented a 20-year-old. I've never parented a 15-year-old. I need training wheels too. But yeah, Susan, some just like, I guess, early experiences that you remember, and maybe some early ways where you realized, okay, there's things that I need to make sure to be accountable for as a parent.
Well, sure. I think the first thing is that before I could be a really effective parent to a child with OCD, or I could be an effective parent of a child with OCD, I had to grieve not being the parent I thought I was going to be, because I thought I was going to be this like, oh, baby kind of parent, like, you're good, pick yourself up. And like, I just figured, I guess, the movies, the books, all that sort of thing. And so I had this very specific, empathetic parenting idea in my head. I wanted to be a mom from the time I was very little. And OCD it lets you be a very loving and very supportive parent. And I love the parent I am now, to be very clear. Super glad I turned out to be this parent. But there was a gap between what I thought I was going to be and what I was being required to be to help my child the best way. And I had a lot of grief around that. So I think that's probably the first thing that was surprising me, was how much I had to figure out how to take care of my own emotions before I could really learn how to take care of my kid. And I think the second thing that I was grieving early on was, I didn't know, like, it's easy to say now, oh, my daughter's getting her PhD. Like, at the time, that did not seem possible ever. And so what we were trying to do versus what other families were trying to do just felt like it had a huge gap. And so grieving, it's not even grieving. It was like accepting the child in front of me while still believing in the person that she could become. It was like such a balance. Because I needed to love exactly what I was given. Kind of makes me emotional to talk about it. And what I was given was a mess. Like, it was a mess. It was messy. It was loud. It was odd. It had a lot of judgment from other parents, had a lot of judgment from teachers. And yet I needed to love the person in front of me. And I was very, very clear about that early on, which I'm grateful for now. But I had to believe in the person I thought she could be, so that we were always having a North Star. So that was probably the big things that happened early on. And then there was just the insurmountable non-understandableness of what was occurring, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe that. It just felt like a mountain that I couldn't get over, of not understanding what the heck was happening and what I was supposed to do about it. So.
Yeah, the list. I mean, there was little. I absolutely identify with a lot of what you were saying. Is like learning to. I always said, like, I had to unparent. I had to learn not to parent the way I thought I had to be a parent. So I had to learn a lot of things, or change my expectations, as well as come to grips with the facts that, like, the future was tomorrow's problem. To your point about, like, could you be a PhD? Could she go to college? Could she do whatever in a few years? It was like, that's not today's problem. Today's problem is getting our shoes on and getting out the door, or just figuring out how we'll put our socks on, and can we get a sock on?
Right? And I was like this super high achiever too, right? So I was thinking I would have this super high achiever kid, and like all of a sudden, over, I don't know, the space of a few months, my only goal was joy. Like, my only goal was that my kid could just be like happy, and like everything else seemed to not matter anymore. And that like was such a blinder that got ripped off of me. And that doesn't mean, obviously, she's getting her PhD. It doesn't mean that success in certain ways wasn't still important to us as a family, but it just could not be front and center anymore for a long period of time.
It was hard. Fiona, you've got a little bit of a taste of, I imagine some of the things that Susan was talking about, you've heard from parents that you talk to, and kids. And Yeah, I mean, what as a therapist, a parent comes in, whether it's the first time or, the 15th time, what are some things that you tend to like, how are you educating, training, teaching, and being kind of that, being the therapist to the parent or the
Totally.
caregiver?
As you guys were talking, I was jotting things down because you were speaking so eloquently about such common themes that I hear about. And I think that one, Susan, that you were talking about is loving, like having so much love for your child and at the same time having to hold up like challenges for them. And that's true with parenting in general, but it's so true when mental health comes into picture and when OCD comes into the picture. And I think kind of humans in general seem to think we have one emotion at this time, and then, the next moment we'll have another emotion. And that's not true. Like multiple emotions can be happening at the same time. You can be loving your child unconditionally while also challenging them. And I love to kind of remind parents of that or dialectic rather. And figure out like how can we honor that in your family, and match that to like your family values, your parenting values. The other thing that you were speaking about, that OCD is just so inherently like confusing and doesn't make sense and illogical, and that's super hard for parents because they're like, my kid is doing, and it actually is kind of nonsensical things, right? Like once you start to really learn about OCD, like to me, I talk and think about it kind of all day. So it makes sense to me now. Like a lot of it really makes sense. But when you're watching a loved one, do a bunch of compulsions, rituals, whatever, you're like, why are you doing this? Like, you don't have to do this. And I think that's often a really difficult time for parents of like, where's my kid that doesn't usually do these kind of nonsensical things? And it's hard to not slip into the path of like, just like, you don't kind of like demanding it out of them, right? Like, you don't have to do this. And it makes sense why you want to tell them you don't have to do this, because one, it's true. Two, you're like trying to help them see, right? But sometimes that's not the most helpful way. And like finding that balance of like, I know this is really hard for you and this is OCD. Let's figure out a different way to do it can be an awesome balance.
And it's true. Once you understand OCD, then it really does kind of, if I can say it ever really makes sense, but like, what's going on, what the pattern is. Like, whatever it is, it's pretty much the same pattern no matter what the topic is, right? And so after a while, you can wrap your brain around that. But at first, it just is like, no, I told you it's not going to rain, so you're fine, you're not dying. What?
Right.
Why are you asking me again? Right? That's just really hard I found that to be really hard as a parent to figure out why my really smart little kid was suddenly asking me the same thing over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
And then also like doctors.
Why your explanations weren't working.
And then doctors are like, has she been through trauma? Has this happened? Has this happened? And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, she goes to preschool, like, so like you're freaking out as a parent, like, did I miss something? Like, what's happened? And then like the other theme that I would say from early on was not being able to get her diagnosed. Like, you have this little 3-year-old and people are like, oh, it's probably a stage. She'll grow out of it. Self-soothe, blah, 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 blah. The thousands of things people said that like, I hope it's getting better, but it was very tough to figure out. And we were just lucky that we had OCD in the family. So when certain themes started happening for us, I was like, oh, wait, I know what this is, right? But if I hadn't had that in my family, I'm not sure how long we would have wasted time.
Yeah.
Trying to figure it out.
It's so common that folks with OCD get misdiagnosed with other things. Like I'll have a lot of teens that come to me that a provider might have thought they had like psychosis or something because they were doing these kind of nonsensical things.
Yeah, there's a comment here, Cash H, but kids learn to hide it, and I think that's also true. You see something that maybe you might get in trouble for, or you're afraid of something, and so you don't want to make it public. There was certainly in our learnings like, oh, wait a minute, why isn't the logic landing here. That if you do something, you will not die. No matter how I simplify the explanation, that's just not. It's not connecting. It seems to be, but it's definitely not connecting. And this is like one of my first inklings. And this disorder does not work the way I think it should work, or an explanation should work. What are Fiona, I'll start with you. What are some mistakes that you've seen, or well-intentioned parents might commonly do during treatment or when learning about treatment? Maybe some simple suggestions you might have to like tweak the process or just be aware.
Yeah, you just totally reminded me of one, of talking so much about it. And even me as a therapist that I do exposure response prevention, sometimes I'll like catch myself in sessions and I'm like, Fiona, stop talking. We got to just get to the exposure part. Because I say this to kids and teens, like I could describe to you all day how to play a piano, but you would never be able to then just go and sit down and play it. Like you would have to practice.
True.
And that's a really good metaphor for exposure therapy. Of course, I'm talking about what therapists do, but with the parent side, I think parents are so wanting to help, right? And wanting to like free their kid from this like tremendous distress that they're seeing. And of course, like you're a good parent, of course you want to do that. The trap is then talking about it so much like this doesn't make sense, you don't have to do it, and it turns into like a conflict between the parent and the kid or teen, even though of course you're trying to help, you're not meaning to cause a conflict. So I think watching that of like, sometimes like folks with OCD know it totally doesn't make sense, and that's even like more frustrating. Sometimes it's not as clear, but regardless, talking, and I always say to parents, like, make sure you're kind of talking to your kid, not talking to OCD, because doing with what they're doing, you're unfortunately inadvertently, like not on purpose, reinforcing OCD because you're asking OCD, not your kid, why are you doing these things? And it can kind of like get the OCD brain even more thinking about that, which is unhelpful. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then I will say parents are always like, all right, Fiona, got it. What am I supposed to say then? Like, I don't want them to be in the moment like, Fiona told me not to say anything. So what I always think is kind of back to that like love challenge, like dialectic. So if you see your kids struggling with something and you're like, oh gosh, I just, I don't know what to do right now. Like I don't have a plan, whatever. I think saying a supportive statement. So say like validating that it's hard what they're going through, but also instilling confidence that, they could handle it or whatever. Like oftentimes I'll say to kids, I know this is really terrifying. OCD is saying blah, blah, blah. I also know that you can handle this. Like you've done XYZ in the past and it's time to face this challenge. But a real quick one would be, I know this is so scary. I know this is hard, whatever you think that your kid's going through. And I know you're brave. And they might not then be able to not do the compulsion or whatever you're like hoping them to do, but at least then you've instilled, I'm here for you and I believe in you.
And I imagine, keep it reinforcing that. It's not just like you're saying it once. It is something that I'm not saying you repeat. It's not about repetition. It's about making sure you're reinforcing that, you're here, because it could be different days, different times. But, I recognize that whatever's happening at this moment is tough and difficult, and I'm here to help in whatever way I can.
Yeah. And you might not be able to help in that moment, and that's okay too, right? You're at least saying like you're here.
Yeah. Susan and I probably have spent time where we're just sitting there and just like, oh, what I'm just going to do right now is just sit with you. And that's it. Or, or leave you alone, because that seems to be what you want.
I was just thinking too, like when they're mad at you, when OCD is mad at you for not helping. And like, the other thing we used to say a lot is I love you. I will help you. But I am not talking to or helping OCD because I love you. And that was like, it took a while. I mean, there were plenty of little fits along the way of, no, you're not helping me. But like over time, that sunk in that I loved her and I would fight OCD with her, but I would not help OCD with her because that wasn't what was best for her. And I think over time, that repetition, like that's in her now. Like she will not help OCD.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we're talking about this, I'm also, I want to say it's not like you say what I suggested to say or what Susan suggested to say and then everything's fine, right? Like most of the time, the opposite. Like it's like
It's a long game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roller coaster, no doubt. Let's talk a little bit about, OCD can introduce a lot of tension in a family. It tends to impact things that maybe you care about as a parent or, is most influenced to with maybe one of the child's favorite things. So it can, to say it introduces friction maybe is treating it lightly. What are some, when OCD conflicts with family rules or parenting beliefs, such as like aggressive behavior or messiness or anger, or how we treat each other, how does a parent help separate kind of like OCD versus like what I still, don't want to have in my home as a parent? Susan, how did you come to grips with that, and what were some ways you handled? And then I'll turn it over to Fiona.
I have to say, as you were asking, I was like, I feel like the answer to that is topic by topic. So I'll give like one on either side because I hate when people say it depends, but like it so truly does depend. So like the one sort of side of it was we have a value of not hitting in our family. And so that includes parents, it includes parents hitting kids, it includes, that's just a core value. It includes the dog, the cat, whatever. And when Meg was really young, like she was so frustrated and so full of anger at what was happening inside of her brain and causing her not to be able to do things that she wanted to do. And like, that's so understandable that she was that angry. Like she was having this war inside her own brain of, I want to go to the playground, but I can't go to the playground because I'll get sick if I touch the playground equipment. That's a lot for like a 4 or 5-year-old to be wrestling with, right? So imagine she wanted to go to the playground and I was saying, no, you couldn't go to the playground. She'd be mad at me. She didn't know who to be mad at. And so we pretty quickly had to draw a line. And the way I always talk to parents about it is, well, certain behaviors are dangerous and you can't have your 21-year-old out there hitting people when they have an OCD concern, right? And so we have to start building foundational things at a very early age to make it clear that some behaviors are not okay. And so one of those was hurting yourself or hurting anyone else. So that's where we draw a very firm line, and we didn't punish in the moment. So if she was having a panic attack around OCD and she hit me or the dog or whatever, like that was just part of what was going on. We could get her to safety, right? Get the dog to safety, whatever. But afterwards, there would be a consequence for that because that behavior was not tolerated. So before we did that, we gave her alternative behaviors that she could do in those moments. We reminded her of those in the midst of it. And we were very clear that we understood why it was happening and we understood anger and that anger was okay and all of those sorts of things, right? We worked with our therapist on all of that, but we did not tolerate the behavior and there was a consequence. So she'd lose TV for 3 days if she hit me during an OCD attack. But if she like threw a doll at the wall, that was completely acceptable. Like did not mind that in the least. The other extreme is like homework, right? Because that was a very core value for us was you get your work done before you play. But like it just
How'd you handle that? Yeah.
I mean, because she was doing so much more work than anyone I knew was doing, just trying to get through the day. Like genuinely, like I was watching this child fight through every minute to just get to the next step, to like get to school, whatever it was. And so like homework, I just pretty quickly was like, that just can't be a core value. And the joke in our house was I at some point just said, homework doesn't matter till you're in high school. Grades don't matter till you're in high school. Just get through, right? And that was like I have to say, if you knew me, you'd be like, are are you kidding me? Because I am serious about studies, and A++++ is just like in my core. But I gave that up and was like, that's not. And so there's a stretch of things in between there that we had to make decisions about of what was important. And so I give those two examples because I think they're ones parents talk to me a lot about, is like hitting, rage attacks, hurting other people. And then they talk about like skills, cleaning, things like that. And I'm like, you just got to figure out where your boundaries are and what is this kid already doing that's so much more than maybe you're doing in your life or anyone else is doing. If they're spending 10 hours a day working through OCD stuff, then we do not have to do homework.
Yeah. I think we did something different, well, similar, where it was like ERP is the thing that comes first. So whereas like, clearly, you want to make sure you have a snack after school, but it was like, you're not going to see your friends. You're not going to, after school activities are not going to happen. Homework's not going to happen. Like, we're going to make sure we do the ERP, and then we can make the decision on how the rest of the night or the day is going to go. And something you said about parent, like punishing in the moment is so key. Definitely like reinforce that. It's really hard to, I think of myself. If I'm really angry and somebody tells me, it's really hard sometimes to be like, yeah, I know what you're saying is rational, but I'm not going to listen to you right now, And so coming back at a different time to explain, hey, when you did this or this happened and so as a result, here's the consequence, because OCD or not, we don't have, hitting is not something that we tolerate in our house, or, punching a hole in a wall is not something we tolerate in our house. And so those kind of expectations, when there's a quieter moment, reinforce and then sticking to that. Fiona, do you ever have parents who have trouble doing that, and or trouble kind of being holding up some of those parenting beliefs that they have at their core?
Totally, yeah, because I think it's really confusing, right? It's like, well, now OCD is part of the picture. Like, what are we supposed to be doing? And I think it's really important. Like, I really want parents to remember, like, still your, well, not your original parenting idea, everything except for OCD, your original parenting ideas and values. That being said, making sure that it's fair expectations. Like, Susan, I love what you're saying about homework. Just a little plug that I always like to say about homework, school home or academic homework. This is also because I work a lot with folks with ADHD. Is it used to be thought that kids need to do homework to like practice what they've learned, so it gets really stuck in their head. But research has shown that there isn't any practice effects. So once you've like learned a concept, you really don't have to be repeating it. So I always use that in school meetings too.
I wish you'd done that when my kid was in school.
Yeah. Some of the I might want to use with my current employer. We'll see if that works. My one-on-one with my manager. Hey, I got this core skill. Why do I have to keep it?
But yeah, fair expectations, right? It's like if they're doing a ton of work on ERP stuff, picking your battles.
I had a great therapist that you remind me of, Fiona, and she said, what are the 5 most important things to your family? And it wasn't quite like setting values, but it was similar to that. And the reason was because I was like, she was like in the teen years, and I was trying to figure some things out about cleaning. And it wasn't really even OCD. It was just like one of those battles I was in, And they were like, well, what are the 5 most important things to you? And like, we walked through them, and I was like, cleaning is not on the top 5. That doesn't mean it won't be for your family. Like, it very well might be. But like, I had very clear things, like working hard and having a passion were 2 of them. And so like those things, telling the truth, that was like one of them. So like, we had this list up on our wall for forever, and that's what we followed. And if cleaning had to do with something around those 5 things, then it would fall to the top of the list. But otherwise, I was like, you win some, you lose some. And now she's super neat and like criticizes me. And I'm like, really? Because years I dealt with that.
That's funny. Yeah,
changing the world.
I think picking your battles is a really important skill to get as a parent and a parent of kids with OCD. I also think hitting, of course, is a really common one with younger kids, and yelling too. It sounds like you had an awesome consequence and is totally in line with if OCD wasn't in the picture, like you would lose access to screens. I think it's just making it really fair for the kid. And what I mean by that is making it really clear what hitting is. So like sometimes like kids are like, Fiona, you're like the FBI with this or whatever. That doesn't really make sense. Kind of like a lawyer, but they don't know what lawyers are. But it's like, okay, hit it, or you'll lose screens for a day, 3 days, whatever, if you do anything that could hurt yourself or hurt others. So like throwing a doll towards the wall wouldn't, like Susan's example, wouldn't be an example of that. But throwing like, a water bottle at mom would be an example of that. And like young kids get that, 4-year-olds get that.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important of like, let's do a kid definition of what the expectation is. So it's really clear for everyone.
Yeah, we used to have like, so it was like, okay, would you like to hit the pillow now? Would you like to get me the pillow? Would you like me to get your pillow so you can hit it? Like that was that's where the frustration could be, Susan, what you were saying, I wonder if like you ever said, okay, should we get some dolls to throw right now? Like, is that, so you're almost like, this is okay, we're okay doing this and we're fine. And I know like both of us have talked to Natasha Daniels about this, and she has a similar thing where there's like a thing that's okay to hit and throw in the house. And that's, and those are the kind of rules and the way you set up to working. One of the things I want to follow up with, because it's about like boundaries. So when is it appropriate for parents to have that firm boundary versus, making an accommodation for OCD? And I know this is also kind of depends on the situation, but I do think there's can be parents who are maybe more black and white, like this will never be tolerated. But when it comes to OCD, it's hard to, it can make things difficult and make, overcoming the anxiety harder.
Yeah. I do think, as a therapist, like I will always target hitting. Like we want to squash that one. It's just important one for, for them, like having peer relationships and all of that and to function well at school. Other though, like, not obvious ones, or like when parents are being pulled into kind of participating in OCD, like answering the reassurance questions or standing by the door for an hour while their kid does their ritual before they can leave the house. Those ones are super difficult to decide on. And I would honestly say like a blanket recommendation is I would just be like, don't like take it all away at once, or say like you can't do all of that at once, because again, going back to the fair thing, it's not fair for the kid who has OCD, but also it's not fair for you because it might be like impossible to follow through. I don't know. Some families, maybe they're just starting to see some OCD and it is actually possible, but I do kind of caution against that as we're talking about, I don't want to feed OCD. I love you, but I'm not doing this thing for OCD. I sometimes like parents will really run with that, and then everyone gets disappointed, and it's just not good. A plug for the space book.
Yes. Yeah.
Book, yeah. But I think it describes it pretty well, like how to structure, how to respond.
I think there's also something like you can have, like, let's say in my family, the rule is that we keep clean bathrooms. Okay, that seems pretty basic. Like we all want to have a clean bathroom. Then you get a kid with OCD that's washing their hands 30 times a day, 50 times a day, and they're throwing dirty towels all over the floor. So like two things are happening there. One, my rule is being broken. Okay. Two is OCD is occurring, and there's something bigger than a clean bathroom that has to happen. To me, there are a couple of things that can occur here that pretty quickly, as a parent of a person with OCD, I had to figure out. I did not want to create shame. And sometimes being too strict around my expectations or my rules was causing shame. So then I'm yelling at her for having a dirty bathroom. And so now not only does she have OCD screaming at her, but I'm yelling at her about the dirty bathroom. And so the flip side to that for me was curiosity. Trying to figure out why things were happening and treating it with curiosity with her rather than shame and judgment. And the biggest example I can tell you is when she was in like first grade, she came home and told me that she thought she'd heard a kindergartner. She was in like this Montessori multi-age program. And I was horrified. Like, what? Am I going to have to call parents? My kid's a bully. Like, I mean, I probably was like super strict with her. And then she came home the second day and said it. And I kind of was like, Susan, like, go with curiosity. Like, why do you think that happened? Right. And so we started talking about, well, she has scrupulosity. I didn't figure that out for a while, but I was pretty darn sure that my kid who had known how to take care of the bathroom or known how to be kind to people wasn't suddenly this like
hitting people and
people, angry, toilet paper throwing, first grader, kindergartner beating up person. Right. And so like what was happening that she was feeling like she needed to tell me that. And so like, I think about those things a lot because like how you want your kid to keep talking to you, right? You don't like, I've seen a lot of comments in the chat from adults here that are like, I hid it. I've learned to mask it. I learned not to tell anyone about it. And I think a lot of that is like, as parents, we have the opportunity to do something different, which is to create an environment where we're not ashamed to talk about our problems in the home and that we can find solutions together. And, like if your kid says they're being mean to kindergartners, like it is really hard not to be horrified by that. And you'll hear a lot worse things than that from people that have OCD they have other intrusive thoughts that are much worse. But if you can lead with curiosity, that really helps, or it helped us a lot.
Yeah. Michael was just in the comments kind of plus oneing that comment. I think curiosity also comes to like when you're dealing with exposures and how you might think that up. Like what are some fun, more interesting ways? We always found that, if we could make what we were doing more irresistible than the fear, then it was going to be something that would pique interest and could work. For example, it's like when we had issues around water and we wouldn't want to drink tap water. Well, if you drank that tap water, you could throw a glass of water in Dad's face. Okay, that's fine. Okay, I will do that. And that was a very big so, and it was like the expectation was like a sip, like the cup comes to your lips, your mouth opens, you swallow, could be a thimbleful, could be a millimeter, and it's swallowed. And then next thing can be, we go into the bathroom and a cup of water goes on my face, or we did a lot of spraying water. We did a lot of like physicals, but those were always like, really? So you're telling me? And yes. And so there is a bit of that accountability too, which I think it comes to like, okay, what can you be? I always think I clearly learned this was different than a cold or, a cut or something physical. I can't just give you rest and you get better. I can't give you medication, you get better. You have to figure this out on your own. So, but I can be the cheerleader. I can be your advocate. I can help you, make sure that, you're getting things in school or your people who are watching you during the day are aware of this. So there are things I can do to scaffold around, OCD. But like, yeah, let's talk a little bit maybe about that. On more on the like the positive side, there are a lot of benefits to, parents being accountable isn't always a negative. It's like, hey, what are you doing to help in a good way? So, for like some ways that you might, whether it's like, helping train somebody in how to do a hierarchy or an ERP at home, or, ways that you can show up positively for your loved one, because it's not always a kid. With OCD as a parent or caregiver.
Totally. I think like validation or like understanding, validating tough emotions, validating how tough OCD can be, and also just like learning a lot about OCD can be really helpful. So that, because I'm reading a bit in the chat too and thinking about some parents who like their kids are not wanting to talk about it, and sometimes that's totally fine, and we don't want to push too hard on that, but if it is shame driving that, just like really understanding. Oh, I had one family that listened to like an OCD book on audio tape, like on a car drive or something. And it was like for an older teenager, and he just really loved that support. And he was saying like, see how hard it is. Like, I've been telling you. And it was like a really nice therapeutic thing. So I think understanding OCD goes a long way. And OCD is not like, it takes a while to really understand it, I think. But your kid probably can tell you a lot about what it's like. I love that, leading with curiosity.
I just had a mom ask me recently. We were talking about, she has a daughter, and she was asking if her daughter said, you could come with me to therapy, was that like a good thing? Should she do it? And I was like, wait, I'm not understanding the question, because like that seems like yes, But then we talked about it, and I was like, no, I can see the reasons why you're feeling hesitant. Like maybe you don't want to be too involved. You don't want to make everything about OCD. Maybe you're just not sure how to approach it. And I was thinking about all of these kids at our online OCD camp, teenagers, high schoolers, young adults, and at our big conference that we do. And that like over and over, when I ask them what we could do more for them, it is help my parents understand what I do. That's like the answer every time. It's just, I want my parents to understand what I'm going through. I want my parents to understand how to be supportive in the right ways, and not basically, they're these young people who are so smart, and they're like, I don't want my parents to be feeding OCD. That is not what I want. Like OCD might want that in the moment. It might seem like that's what I want, but I don't. And gosh, they're just so smart young people if we can stop and listen to them. God, and I saw this note in the chat about setting boundaries for young adults. I just want to say, you guys, young adults are hard, period, in the story. Teenagers and young adults. So like how to set boundaries around that. I don't know what you mean by that. Like, is that boundaries around OCD, or is that boundaries,
I mean, I was taking that as kind of like, okay, it's a little easier to set boundaries around somebody, a younger child, but like when you have what are some of the things, this, to me, I started thinking about values when it comes to OCD, and is there an incentive, or is there a reason when somebody may not want to, do something that might, fight back against their OCD, or do something that might, help them overcome what they're concerned about. Sometimes as kids get older, and you think about your own life, it's about the values that you hold. What is it stopping you from doing? You want to see your friends more, you want to go out more, you want to drive in a car, you want to go to a movie, you want to, and that can be somewhat motivating.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it does have to come down to what that young person wants in life. And that's tricky to talk about sometimes when someone has OCD, but also like parenting is period hard work. Like I don't like drawing boundaries with Chris. If Chris is like, can you be there 20 minutes early? And I'm like, oh, Chris, I already have plans, right? I'm like, oh, sure, of course I'll be there, Chris, because I'm kind of a people pleaser. And so it isn't always like easy to draw boundaries, period. And so like for that, I needed a lot of support. So I had a therapist, especially when my kid was a teenager, and I talked about parenting strategies in therapy to try to figure out how to be a tough enough parent in some ways, which you think I would have gotten from OCD alone, but I didn't. There were still places where I needed support on that. What were reasonable boundaries to draw? Like learning that even like sometimes is hard because maybe you didn't grow up in a family that had reasonable boundaries in either direction. So figuring out what they are, drawing some control around them, writing them down so that you really remember what they are in the moment. I think, and then I like to reward myself. I'm big on that. So I have rewards for myself when I do a good job of setting boundaries and holding them.
Yeah, we all need to, like, there are tough days, and there's some days you get home, and you're like, what's the reward? Well, tonight I'm going to go out for work, or tonight I'm opening up a bottle of wine. I'm gonna have a nice glass of wine and watch the show I want. Or, we this last 2 weeks has been really easy to reward myself because it's like, I'm going to spend time watching the Olympics, like,
Yes.
work has to end because, you know, the USA and Canada is on tonight with hockey. I have to watch that, you know, like there's things there. But you bring up something that's I think is like helping accountability about modeling that resilience, modeling the uncomfortableness. I think it's also like sharing things that you find hard in your life. We talked about this, both of us, during the OCD camp a few weeks ago about, you know, OCD can give you the chance to talk about things that are hard in your life. They may not be totally relatable to OCD, but like, you know, hey, son, daughter, this is, you know, this is what I find hard in my life. This is what is really hard for me, or I had a hard day at work. Here's why. And this is what I'm hard about, or I'm mad about, or I'm frustrating about. It can open a different line of communication.
Chris, you just want me to tell my dancing story. I know what's happening here.
Oh yeah.
What happens when I'm on with you? So one of ours is like, I actually have social anxiety, which I know it probably doesn't seem like I have it. Like here, I'm like talking on a show. I don't care who's listening, blah, blah, blah. In fact, one-on-one with a stranger on plane, no social anxiety. It's groups of people. It's like parties where I don't really know anyone. Oh, awful. Walking into a restaurant, having to meet someone.
Susan at the OCD camp with 2,000 people when you had to get up and speak. Yeah.
Totally fine. No problem. But like other situations really bad. And so one of the rewards for my daughter, because I decided to be open about things I was scared of and not just be brave mom. One of her favorite rewards was making me do like a crazy dance in a restaurant where I just had to walk in and start like singing Frozen or whatever the heck it was. Like, you know, it was rough, let me tell you, but like it was so hard for me, and she would see it be so hard for me, and she would see me do it anyway because I loved her and because I didn't want to be afraid to do things the same way I didn't want her to be afraid to do things. So that was like a really good reward system for her, was to get to make up the next crazy thing, me dancing down the aisles at Walmart, happily singing to whoever I saw in the aisles. Luckily, I was not taken away really, but
now it'd be like it would be a live stream. Somebody would be live streaming you. Look at this person in the store.
Social was not really around, but right? I think like all of her life, I've tried to model what I'm afraid of. And that is really hard as a parent to like admit your weaknesses, I think. So I'm not saying I'm at all perfect about that. She would probably laugh at me even talking about it, but like, I keep trying to say, this is where I'm afraid, or this is where I'm insecure. I've got things too. You're not alone in that, because it is kind of weird to be the kid in the family that's scared of things. If no one else in the family is scared of things, that can make you feel really alone, I think. And so knowing that you're on a team together, even if like my fears weren't maybe as big as hers, we could acknowledge that and yet still say like, you're a part of this family.
Yeah. I love this so much. And it sounds like you guys did it perfectly. I have had some parents get tripped up in this one, that it turns into like comparative suffering, and the kid is like, no, that is not nearly as bad as OCD. I told you, you don't know. So one, like, I think still do it though. Like, model it. Kids, teens, humans learn from seeing other people doing. We're big social learners. Watching other people do things, not other people just talking about doing things. So if you want, it's still awesome to demonstrate that. You might not want to like connect it to an OCD moment, right? Like you might want to just casually be mentioning like, oh man, I was so nervous about this thing. I was so scared about this thing.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. This is what it doesn't necessarily, it's not like a comparative it's just like, it's okay to open up about things that are frustrating in your life or make you mad that maybe have nothing to do with the family. But, you know, I think my daughter's got a better window into my wife, Allie, and our like working from home during COVID, getting to hear conversations that we were having with other people on our teams, and like seeing how and what we were asked to do or had to do or ask other people to do, or having tough conversations with people, being in the room like, oh, okay, you know, dad and mom, I get an idea what they do, but I also see why maybe they're frustrated. I joke now that I'm a parent. I realize like when I was a kid, when my dad would come home from work, and like the type of drink my mom would order would really depend on how bad we were. It was like a glass of wine, and I'd be like, oh, okay, a glass of wine was probably we're fine. It was like a double martini. It was like, okay, that was a really bad day, and clearly, my dad immediately was like, gotta make this drink because this is good. Yeah, but like those little kind of outputs. What we touched on this earlier on about just making sure that you are, as a parent, and I also think this comes in with siblings, making sure that you're always not just focused on OCD. You're modeling your own, making sure you have your own time, your own, whether it's self-care or doing things that like, so OCD isn't always in every conversation, isn't trying to dominate your life, or making space for other things, and making sure that you hold yourself accountable for like, today is about this, or today is about me doing this and not about that. I don't know, like Susan, I'm sure that you had areas where you kind of had to make that happen, but Fiona, as like the therapist for other parents and families, like how do you, when a family's in crisis, how do you also kind of make sure that to let them know like it's okay to actually go for a walk, it's okay to like leave the house, it's okay to do something different.
Yeah. I think so funny. You're like reading my mind. I literally wrote down, not everything is about OCD as something to bring up. So
which my daughters would tell us all the time, like, it's not always about OCD. Yeah.
That's who I'm thinking of. Teenagers. That are like, or like, I know that Fiona told you to say this or something. And then the parents and I have to work on like, we don't want to say annoying things when we're trying to be supportive, but whatever. I think, this is like such a metaphor that everyone hears, but if you're in a plane and you needed to put oxygen masks on, like you are supposed to put on yours before you put on others. And I think that is super true for parents, but it's really hard because it's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm a parent, my entire job is to keep them safe and help them and teach them things and guide them. And they come before me. It's like a natural thing that, it's like an evolutionary thing that your brain is telling you. But you really have to think about taking care of yourself is taking care of them, because you're setting everyone up for more success. And obviously that just totally depends on like what the individual family situation is. I also think like sometimes when parents are having a really hard time taking time for themselves, or they're kind of like, I can't leave my kid, or I have to be around to monitor OCD, or like, one, we got to talk about not everything's OCD. Like, are you accidentally being annoying when you're meaning to be really helpful? But then two, something that I think is really important to think about is we don't want to accidentally fragilize people with OCD. And I think about that for like myself when I'm thinking about my clients, but also for parents when they're thinking about their kids. Yeah. And it's the two things are true at once, right? This is really difficult. This is horrible what they're going through. And we believe in them. Like we don't think they're like powerless to even though it really, really might seem like it. And, everyone's different on kind of the steps and the scaffolding they need and everything. But sometimes it's really helpful for parents to be like, oh yeah, like, no, I believe my kid will be okay if I go for a walk or go out to dinner with my friends or something.
I want to just speak really honestly about that from a parental perspective, because first of all, I completely agree with you about not making everything about OCD with your kid, like or loved one. That's like so important. So I'm going to ignore that for a hot second and just talk about it from the parent perspective, which is that, I was driving her to therapy twice a week. I was spending hours in the morning trying to get her to go to school. I was a working parent, so I had a job that I was trying to keep even vaguely abreast of. And I would say, in all fairness, I completely lost myself for a number of years. And I think that depends on the level of severity as well. We were relatively severe. So it was taking up the majority of her day and thus the majority of my day.
Yeah.
And so like, I remember this moment when I was like, I haven't bought anything new to wear in like 2 years. And I was like, okay, you got to go to the store. And I went and I started crying in front of the mirror because I was like, I don't care. Like, I just don't care. And so for me, I would say putting my oxygen mask on was going to therapy for myself, making time for that, and getting on anxiety meds for myself because it was such an overwhelming process and trying to be calm all the time when in reality I was super stressed. And then there was like just the like psychic energy of worrying that this was my child's entire life. Like, it was very hard for me to go out with friends who were talking about a soccer goal, and I was thinking about whether she ate one M&M and how much she cried before she did that. You know, and like, so I want to say that to parents only in that, like, I'm not encouraging you to be as like a mess as I was, but I also think it's okay if you are and if you're there now, because it, you know, it was like having a child with a really severe, you know, like a cancer, and yet no one was talking to me about it. Nobody was bringing me casseroles. Like, there was no fundraising for it. There was no awareness about it. Nobody was like checking in on me because it was this mental health thing.
Yeah.
And so it really left me pretty alone with not many people to talk to about it. If I did try to talk to most people about it, they gave me terrible parenting advice that just made me want to punch a wall myself, right? And we were trying not to punch walls. So
yeah,
I'll just say that I found it to be very, very hard to put my oxygen mask on. It was necessary, and I did do it over time, but it was genuinely a really rough time. And I think for me, it was going to the conference and finding other parents that I could like talk with that understood what I was talking about and were celebrating the same kind of wins that brought me out of a lot of that, to be able to talk about it and to start working with other parents and being a part of an advocacy community. That was the best thing for me. But it was hard to put my oxygen mask on.
Susan, I'm also kind of thinking like, because yes, because I'm also thinking like, well, maybe that was your oxygen mask, you know, like it really depends on the parents. Like for you, you like, nope, I'm doing this. Like, I am spending the hours per day. And I probably felt like you weren't doing it, but you were doing it. And, you know, look
That's
at your.
very nice of you to say, Fiona.
yeah.
See, this is why we all want a good OCD therapist, because they'll make us all feel like great.
But I do think it's so important to figure out what is individually important to your family. I mean, now I feel like I'm tooting my own horn, but like a good therapist will help you, and that's going to look super different. And I think all versions of that is totally fine. Like the parents that are like, nope, I'm like going out with my friends and stuff, love it. The parents that are like, I just can't do that. I'm going to have so much guilt. Yeah, you don't want to cause more distress right now. That wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, fun. Sometimes it's little moments. Thank you, Susan, by the way, for sharing that vulnerability. I mean, it's tough to talk about, but you know, it is true. And there's a lot. It's just, if it was a straight line, you know, we'd all be OCD conferences and needing community, and you know, having conversations and live streams wouldn't be needed. And that's one day we hope to get to that point. But you know, these conversations, it's hard, it's difficult. There's not an easy answer. What works for somebody may not work for you, but it's, you know, for me, it was a lot of like trusting the process. It's like, if I read something or somebody said something and it sounded like, all right, let me trust that process is going to work and see how it goes. And when things went totally off the rails, it was like, well, let's keep trusting the process.
You were asking earlier, Chris, about like sort of the positive part of it. And I think I'll just answer that really quickly to say the positive part of it was I learned I was the most creative person. I never imagined I was so creative on so many levels, of being able to think up words and being able to break down fears into the tiniest parts. Like that part, I actually left being kind of proud of myself as a parent about, because I could think very creatively to beat OCD, to win that war. And that part of it was fun in a way, collaboratively with my kid to come up with those kind of things. So that part was good.
Yeah. I mean, you establish a different type of parenting relationship and a different type of closeness. So in a lot of, and that's serving you well. Thank you both so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it. Fiona, where can folks find you, on the socials, or, if they're looking for extra advice? I know you said you're in the Philadelphia area, but yeah.
I I also actually see people across the United States too. So if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I'm on socials, just Dr. Fiona McPhee. And then my website is psychologyforfamilies.org.
Love.
Yeah, great. Susan, what are you up to next, other than both of us shared that, we have some reviews we have to do for the upcoming conference, but what's on your plate, or where can folks reach out to you?
I'm a bit more of a mystery, I guess, because I'm not really a therapist or anything like that, but I'm always at the conferences. You can always run into me there. I'm on lots of the media streams, and I'm finally doing one of my lifelong dreams, which is to try to act in film. And I have my first line in a very small movie next Saturday. I've learned my line. It's all good.
How cool.
I'm super excited about it. And so it's fun to be on the other side of things enough that finding that what truly brings you joy is much easier as a parent.
Very cool. That's awesome. Great to hear it.
I'm very proud of myself.
Yeah, that's really cool. I can't wait to hear how it goes. Yeah. And I want to thank you all for joining us for this conversation. We'll be back next month with another topic and some other guests. But thank you, Dr. Fiona McPhee and Susan Boas, for tonight's conversation on parental accountability. And a huge thank you to the IOCDF. If you like this conversation, you find value in a lot of the IOCDF programming, please, I know it's always an ask, but you can always donate to the IOCDF at iocdf.org/donate, and always have to give a shout out to Jack MHA, our supporters who supporting families. The folks there are great. Just a lot of resources, a lot of giving that's done on Jack MHA. So please check out, look at their site. And if you want to get involved with them, please do. And thanks so much. Hope you all have a great evening, and see you next month.
Thank you both and everyone.